Do-it-yourself mastering with Final Mix. Final Mix is the big daddy of all the Mackie plugins. It consists of two separate 6-band EQ sections, along with a 3-band dynamics section, DC filtering, soft clipping, and a simple noise gate. The name of the plug implies that it is intended to be used on full stereo mixes, but there is no reason not to use it on individual channels or groups within a mix, and many of the factory presets are designed for this purpose. When using Final Mix on full mixes, there may be a temptation to insert it into the master section of the edit during mixdown. While this is perfectly valid, if you intend to compile several mixes onto a CD, it might be better to export each individual mix as a 24-bit file with no overall processing, and then bring them all back into another edit so they can be adjusted in context and with reference to each other. Dragging a separate final mix onto each clip will allow you to optimize the settings for each song. Only one instance of Final Mix will actually be running at any one time, unless you crossfade two clips, so your CPU will not be working any harder than it needs to. At this point, I want to add a word of warning. Many people mistakenly think the main purpose of Final Mix is to make their mixes sound as loud as commercial CDs. While Final Mix certainly can boost the overall level of a track, multi-band compression has a tendency to alter the balance of the instruments within a mix. So if you wish to raise the level of a mix without changing the way it sounds, you should consider using brick wall limiting instead. Final Mix really excels when you need to correct problems in a mix, or adjust it to match other songs intended for the same CD. For example, by compressing the low frequencies of a track to make the bass sound more solid. The logical conclusion, then, is that the mastering presets supplied are of little use except as starting points. After all, how can a preset designer fix specific problems with your mix without knowing what they are in advance? It is important, therefore, to understand how to adjust presets to tailor them to the material you are processing. When browsing through the presets, the first thing to do when finding one you like the sound of is to adjust the output level so that bypassing the whole plug with the active button doesn't cause any large volume changes. Does it still sound better than the original? Now switch to memory B, pick another preset you like the sound of, and adjust the level again. If there are more than 2 presets you like, you can build up a shortlist by saving them as user presets, either using Final Mix's own facilities or using Tracktion's preset menu. Now you need to listen carefully to each preset in your shortlist and compare them to the unprocessed version. Ideally, listen to the mix several times while concentrating on different elements. For example, on the first listen, concentrate on the vocals if there are any. Do they still sit in front of the other instruments as they should? Are the backing vocals still balanced with the lead? Then focus on the bass. Does it still have the definition it should? Is the balance between the bass instruments and the bass drum still correct? If you find you are hearing problems with the processed versions, you can then start to adjust the presets accordingly. The easiest way to tame a preset that is over-compressing your signal is to rebalance the gain structure through the plug. In other words, turn the input level down a bit and turn the output level up a bit to compensate. You should see the gain reduction meters in the dynamics section moving less as the input level is reduced, and you should not be too worried if you end up with 1 or 2 bands applying no gain reduction at all. The next things to check are the EQ sections. Both are identical, but one is configured before the dynamics section and is called pre, while the other comes after the dynamics but before the soft clipping and is called post. These can be enabled or disabled using the blue EQ in or out buttons. The EQ edit buttons allow you to choose which of the curves to edit, while the EQ view buttons will hide one or other to make the display clearer. If the EQs are not set flat already, try disabling them. Each of the 6 bands also has an individual on-off button, along with a choice of peaking or shelving types for each band. Bands 1 to 3 will become low shelving bands if this is switched on, while bands 4 to 6 will become high shelving. Each band can have its frequency and gain adjusted by dragging the relevant point on the graph, while peaking bands can have their bandwidth adjusted by right-clicking and dragging horizontally, just like the 6-band EQ plugs. For more accurate control, double-click the background of the display to show the parameter values, which can then be edited directly. Boosting or cutting a frequency with the pre-EQ will of course change the level that feeds the relevant band of the dynamics section, so it will also alter any dynamics processing for that band. Adjusting the post EQ will not affect the dynamics section at all. The 3 dynamics processors have their transfers displayed along the bottom, and like the 3-band compressor, you can adjust the main threshold by dragging over the graph, or the gain, attack and release parameters for each band. The in buttons above each graph allow you to disable the dynamics processing for that band. If you find a preset that improves the bass parts of your mix, for example, but changes the mid-range or the treble too much, then you can disable those bands and rebalance the gains. You can bypass all 3 bands using the active button in the dynamics section, and the link all and reset functions also work the same way as in the 3-band compressor. The mute button will turn off that band entirely, while the solo button allows you to listen to the sidechain signal. It is here that we find the first difference from the 3-band compressor, which uses the same crossover to feed both the signal path and the sidechain. Final Mix, on the other hand, has extra filters for the sidechain, which can be adjusted independently of the main crossover. By default, both the main crossover and the sidechain filters are displayed superimposed on top of each other in the graph below the EQ section. Like the EQ section, double-clicking the background will bring up precise parameter values for fine adjustment. I find it usually helps to use the Edit and View options in the Dynamics section to show only the filter you are adjusting. The main crossover is exactly like that in the 3-band compressor. You can drag the crossover frequencies horizontally with the left mouse button, while right-clicking and dragging vertically allows you to adjust the filter slope. The key filters, however, are 3 separate bandpass filters, each of which can have its center frequency and gain adjusted by left-clicking and dragging the point on the graph, and its bandwidth adjusted by right-clicking and dragging horizontally. This allows a band to be narrowed so that the dynamics section responds only to one specific element of the mix. For example, you could set the crossover to isolate the low frequencies of the bass guitar and the kick drum, while setting the key filter to just the low thump of the kick drum. The dynamics section will now respond only to the kick drum, while affecting the low part of the kick drum and the bass. So you can use compression to add more weight to the bass without making the kick drum too boomy, or you can use expansion to make the kick thump more without overly affecting the bass. many of the presets have the key filters configured so that they apparently overlap. But because the key filters are fed the signal after the main crossover, this is not the case. Actually, it configures the dynamics section in the same way as the 3-band compressor, so each compressor will be keyed by the same signal that it processes. For more detailed control of the dynamics sections, double-click one of the dynamics graphs. You can now use the 3 band buttons at the top to choose which to edit. Although these look slightly different to the other Mackie compressors, they are in fact identical in the way they operate. The gain and auto makeup options work the same way, and up to 4 extra nodes can be added and edited in the node section. Like the other advanced compressors, adjusting the main threshold will change the ratio, and will change the overall shape of the transfer if you have several nodes enabled. In Final Mix, however, we have the extra option to adjust the gain of the key filter for that band. Increasing the gain is effectively the same as lowering the overall threshold of all nodes together, and vice versa. So if you find a preset that is over-compressing a particular band, try turning down the key filter for that band. The soft clipping can be enabled with the soft clip button, and its threshold can be defined in the field to the right. Subtle soft clipping of just the loudest peaks is usually inaudible, and will allow the average level of the song to be raised slightly. The soft clip section comes after the output gain control, so you can drive it harder by turning this up and vice versa. If you follow Final Mix with a brick wall mastering limiter, soft clipping is probably best turned off. The noise gate can help to clean up the start and end of tracks. Although of course, Tracktion makes it very easy to manually trim the start and end points of the songs and apply fades as needed, which will usually give better results than an automatic gate. DC filtering removes any DC offset in the signal. This will not normally be needed, but if in doubt, it is safe to leave it on.